And we are back on Capitol Tonight. While both students and lawmakers are packing up their backpacks and briefcases for the summer, the push for Common Core reform continues. A, quote, common sense education rally was held at the state capitol yesterday to urge legislative leaders and the governor to withdraw completely from the teaching standards in New York State. In his Red Room press conference today, Cuomo said we are where we are because of the Board of Regents and Commissioner John King, who he says did not handle the implementation of the Common Core properly. Assemblyman Ed Ra is a sponsor of Common Core reform. He is joining me now to discuss. Welcome to Capitol Tonight.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's good to have you. So do you agree with the governor's assessment then that we are here because of the Board of Regents and the State Education Commissioner, not that we agreed to get involved in the Common Core to begin with?
I think it's a combination of both. I think the range of criticism on this obviously has been from bad implementation all the way to problems with the standards. I think the standards themselves have some issues, but I think there has been some legislative action that set the framework for some of this, and red flags were raised along the way. So, I mean, the legislature, I think, and the governor's office do have some responsibility in this, but at the same time, I think the regents and the commissioner have not been as responsive to the public's concerns as I think they could have been.
It's ironic to me, and I know that this has been pointed out in other mediums, but that teachers' unions and Republicans are united on this particular issue. Almost never are you united on this issue. I mean, what you're suggesting, actually they're looking for a moratorium. You're suggesting, or at least yesterday at the rally it was suggested, we should just ditch this entirely. Is that what you think?
Well, the bill that I introduced is a 3-year moratorium on everything. That includes tests and the curriculum itself. Basically says the state cannot force or mandate the local districts to do the curriculum or the testing until the 2016-2017 school year. And in the interim, we would form basically a panel of educators, experts to come together, look at the standards, look at where the issues have come up with English language learners, special education, developmental and age appropriateness, that whole gamut of things, and then really make an affirmative decision whether we want to continue with the Common Core.
But and understood, and there are other people who agree with that, but doesn't that sort of try and put the cart and the horse back into the barn a little bit? I mean, and potentially wreak even more havoc than we're already seeing, because the thing is underway. What you're suggesting is we stop it, revert back to whatever it was that schools were doing prior in terms of instruction, and then when they get their ducks in a row, move back forward again.
Well, I think, like I said, number one, that panel would have to make an affirmative decision to move forward. It's actually very similar to what the first step Indiana took was, and it's similar to some of the initiatives that have passed different houses or been signed into law in a couple of other states as well. But I think what we're really talking about here is halting it as a mandate, so that if a certain district is doing well with this and things are working well, they might be able to move forward, but at their own pace. I know of many districts who really, because they had the financial resources to do so, brought in the teachers over the summer, took the standards, formed curriculum teams within subject areas, and put forth really something more homegrown, and I think they haven't had as many bumps in the road as others.
But doesn't that, I mean, and I can almost hear advocates arguing about it, leave behind those districts that are not of means? I mean, those districts that were not able to put together, to be so forward-thinking, if you will, and to follow the path that you just described. Subsequently, you have kids getting left behind, and you can't recapture those years of education once they're lost.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's part of what's happening now, because those are the districts that are more reliant on, say, the materials on the Engage New York website that are being put out by the state, and we've seen a lot of issues with them, and State Ed is now talking about bringing in teachers to rewrite that rather than using the materials that came from Pearson. So my argument would be that those districts that lack those means are the ones that are most reliant on the state to provide those materials, which we've either rushed out or not really had available for them.
Yeah, what about the possibility of losing $300 million worth of federal aid? I mean, that's how we got into the teacher performance evaluation business to begin with, right? I mean, Common Core and Race to the Top and teacher performance evaluation, all sort of part of the whole same ball of yarn.
Sure. Yeah, the money issue comes up, obviously, every time we talk about this, but I think there's a couple of problems there with the whole argument about the money. Number one, Race to the Top is going to expire. So how long do we have to keep doing this to comply with it? I'm not so sure. I don't think that's really clear as to what the federal government's ability is to, we know about money we haven't gotten yet. Can they claw back money? Some people are arguing they can. I don't see where they have the legal authority to do that.
Right.
But on top of it, it boils down to me, a lot of the districts in suburban areas of this state, they have not gotten much out of this at all. The school district I live in got $22,000 over 3 years.
That would be on Long Island,
yes.
just in case people are
Yeah,
wondering.
down on Long Island. And, they're spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars to implement all this. And I don't think that's a unique story for a suburban district. So a lot of that money really hasn't come down there. They've been spending much, much more than they've ever gotten out of Race to the Top.
You mentioned the bill that you've put forth. I mean, there are a number of different bills all touching on different issues regarding testing, regarding Common Core, et cetera. The governor today talked about ongoing talks in teacher performance evaluation discussions. I mean, it must be frustrating for members of the minority, particularly on Long Island. Not that education is not paramount everywhere in the state, but on Long Island, it's been a big issue, Common Core.
Sure.
And you guys aren't involved in the negotiations over this issue.
Yeah, I mean, and I think one of the things that's come up a lot on Long Island just within school leaders, school board members, superintendents, is this idea of we have a school district that's done well throughout the years, who has a very high graduation rate, who's sending kids off to great schools, off to great careers, and then kind of they feel like, maybe they need some flexibility, that the state should certainly be trying to do everything we can to raise achievement in districts that aren't doing so well, that they should be left alone a little bit. And the frustrating thing when you get into the teacher evaluation side is many of these districts have had for years, prior to APPR, teacher evaluation systems that really worked for the needs of that district. And now the state came in and said, okay, no, you have to do it this way, with a little bit of flexibility locally, but you have to come and do it our way. And that's, I think, caused frustration at the local level as well.
Is this something that the Republican conference will be continuing to push, and particularly now that it's campaign season? I mean, there's a number of active races, not yours necessarily, but there's a Senate race on Long Island that's particularly important. There's congressional races on Long Island. Arguably, and we've seen locally in the Capital Region, Congressman Gibson, for example, make this Common Core, Race to the Top, et cetera, a campaign issue. So is that what we're going to be seeing, that this will be resolved, so to speak, not necessarily on the policy side, but on the political side?
Yeah, I think it's 100% a campaign issue in the statewide races, in the state legislative races, and certainly in the congressional races. It's become an issue in congressional primaries down on Long Island, up everywhere else. My colleague Claudia Tenney, who's running in a congressional primary, it's become an issue in that race. So I think it's something that's going to be talked about a lot this fall, both at the federal and state level in all those elections.
Well, in that, keeping that in your head, I mean, isn't it more beneficial to the Republicans if this does not get resolved actually, so then it's a potent campaign issue going forward?
Maybe arguably, but again, this is not a political issue to me. This is about the children of the state and doing what's best for them. And I think it's cut across the political lines. When you have Tea Party people getting together with teachers' unions to push the same issue, it kind of makes for a strange occurrence, but we had people yesterday in the rally, we had ranging that full gamut from people that are very traditional Democratic voters to people that are really, really, conservative in nature. And they see on this issue eye to eye, whereas they probably don't see eye to eye on any other issue.
On anything else.
Yes.
It's fascinating. I thank you, Assemblyman, for your time. It's a very interesting conversation. Thanks.
Thank you.
We do need to take another quick break, but we will stick with the topic of education.